All right, so some arrests were made down in Venezuela earlier this week. I'm reading from a Reuters report here from Caracas. Venezuela's attorney general on Monday said 14 arrest warrants were issued against civilians and former military personnel for allegedly conspiring against the government of President Nicolas Maduro. On January 15th, Maduro told legislators who backed the government that conspiracy against him and high-ranking government figures had been dismantled between May and December. Ryan, obviously a lot of people are familiar with, probably still not enough people are familiar with, I think it was called Operation Gideon back in 2020. There's a lot happening in Venezuela right now, and there's a lot happening as it pertains to U.S. policy towards Venezuela right now, specifically also as oil and gas prices continue to fluctuate, and that becomes such a center point in an election year. I mean, that's hugely important in an election year. A lot of Venezuelan migrants have fled north to the U.S.'s southern border. And so what we do know is that the United States, will come as a surprise to nobody, has offered material support to the Venezuelan opposition. What we also know is that the Venezuelan opposition has good reason in many cases to be upset with Nicolas Maduro. But what we don't know is exactly the extent of, for example, the CIA's footprint in any of these given operations. What did you make of this, Ryan?
Yeah, we can say for sure that in general, the U.S. is backing the Venezuelan opposition and has tried, multiple times over the years to oust Venezuela's current ruling party. But we don't know specifically, how serious this coup attempt was, if it was actually a coup attempt, or whether it was, just some kind of effort by Maduro to kind of gin up his own supporters. We hope to learn more about it in the next couple of days. This is happening in the context of a presidential election in Venezuela, where both parties have been trying to turn out supporters into the streets to flex their muscles. Neither has been very good at turning a lot out. Like it feels like the energy dial around Venezuelan politics is significantly down. At the same time that this is going on, you're seeing strikers take to the streets across Argentina against our libertarian man down in Buenos Aires, Javier Milei, the dude with the leather jacket and the crazy hair, who kind of shocked the country by winning an election there on this extreme libertarian platform. It's going to put his libertarianism to the test. We'll see, how aggressive he is in bringing state power out to kind of suppress the protests that we're seeing. The protests are against plans that Milei has rolled out, kind of roll back subsidies that will basically go after different targeted sectors of the public economy there.
Afuera.
There you go. Afuera. Afuera. So what do you think? People joke that you scratch a libertarian and you find an authoritarian. Do you think? And how is he going to justify this? Assuming he launches a crackdown, how is he going to justify it with his libertarian principles?
Your libertarian friends would be very upset with you for calling Milei a libertarian, because he is also anti-abortion. He's anti-woke in almost sort of like DeSantis ways. I actually have a piece coming out soon. I need to finish it on how Milei is sort of what the Republican Party kind of wants to be in the United States, but hasn't quite figured it out. So I think it is genuinely very interesting to see where this goes, because everyone's going to want to project onto it what's actually happening. And he did inherit a crazy economy. It reminds me, I don't know about this comparison, right? I'm curious what you think. It sort of reminds me of what happened with Liz Truss. It inherits some economic problems, comes in and does try, at least economically, this sort of full-blown libertarian approach. And the results sort of, let's just say, spoke for themselves in that case.
Yeah, I mean, the Argentine economy is a complete mess because their kind of political structures are a mess and don't really enable a ruling party to kind of run on anything and then implement an agenda. And so you have these kind of minority factions around the country that have veto power, but not over anything, but don't have enough power to actually get anything done. And while we're doing roundups, might as well note that our man Bernie in Guatemala, Bernardo Alvaro, finally, Arevalo, who was a kind of leftist candidate elected in Guatemala quite some time ago, was kept out of being sworn in as president by kind of what people were accusing of being U.S.-backed right-wing forces in the country. But last week he finally was sworn in. The State Department, at one of the briefings I was at, it seemed reluctantly to kind of celebrate the fact that he was finally sworn in. They said, he was legitimately elected, and we're glad that he was, glad that he was finally inaugurated. But it did not seem like the most, ringing endorsement of that process coming to an end, which, to me, if the U.S. interest in Guatemala is stability that reduces the outflow of migration from Guatemala to the U.S.-Mexican border, it feels like you would want a social democrat. Like at this point, I feel like the U.S. ought to just get over this idea that they are going to benefit from instability and smashing unions and low wages from Guatemala, because that's not what our economy relies on anymore. This isn't 100 years ago. We've got low wages that we can exploit from all over the world. So at this point, it feels like we should be kind of rowing together with the rest of the hemisphere. But it seems like old habits die hard, and it's going to be tough to kind of drag the U.S. there.
Yeah, and while we're talking about the State Department, this is how the State Department responded to the arrests in Venezuela. They said the United States is deeply concerned, this is from Matthew Miller, by the issuance of arrest orders and detentions against at least 33 Venezuelans, including members of the democratic opposition, civil society, former members of the military, and journalists. Arrests without due process run contrary to the spirit of the October 2023 electoral roadmap agreement signed by Unitary Platform and the representatives of Maduro, would call for the end of politically motivated harassment, including attacks upon opposition campaign offices and all efforts to stifle the democratic aspirations of the Venezuelan people through fear and intimidation. Now, a lot of people, again, we were talking about Juan Guaido earlier and what happened in 2020. I think with all of these, to your point, Ryan, all these old habits that we all kind of know about and see kind of at work in real time, it's one thing we can sort of study what happened in Chile and others after the fact. But when you're watching these things play out in real time, a lot of it is, and intentionally by our intelligence services, you kind of have to rely on speculation as to what's happening. That said, still, there is a very real and legitimate opposition to Maduro. There was a real legitimate opposition to what Milei called Peronism in South America. And often what the U.S. does is come in and tip the scales and give material support in ways that, again, like it's a tip of the scales. Maybe this opposition is legitimate, it's powerful, it has public support, but without U.S. support, would it be able to materialize in an election? Would it be able to materialize in regime change? Obviously, even the U.S. believes that in many cases not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be, spending their resources over here. So I'm curious to see how this unfolds in Venezuela, because the Biden administration has been trying really hard to work with Venezuela because of oil and gas prices, because of what's happened in Ukraine and Russia, sort of turned to Venezuela. It doesn't seem like a winning strategy, but we'll see how that unfolds going forward.
Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. We'll keep watching that. And stick around, everybody. We'll have more right after this.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.